Hello and welcome to Discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squailia. You're watching this thanks to FATV and the Workers Credit Union's virtual studios. This week, we have Director of Communications for the American Red Cross of Massachusetts, Kelly Isenor, with us to talk about the Red Cross's operations going on and their volunteer needs and maybe other needs that they have going on as well. Thank you, Kelly, for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you, Sam, so much for having me on to talk about this important subject.
All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is the current hurricane season that we are in right now in September 2020, because if we didn't have enough things going on, now we are entering hurricane season. And Red Cross does a lot of work with hurricane disaster victims and other victims of people that may be displaced due to severe weather events. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Right now, as you've all seen from watching the news, we are in the midst of one of the most active hurricane and wildfire seasons that we've seen in recent years. If you've been paying attention, we've already had a hurricane with the letter S. You know how they go through the alphabet, and it's only September. Hurricane season goes for another month, or actually another 6 weeks through the end of October. So it's really been an active season. Right now, the Red Cross has national disaster relief operations all over the country. Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, and the Gulf. We're responding to to wildfires out in California and now in Oregon. Earlier this season, we were in Iowa, where there was that Midwest derecho, which is kind of the worst parts of a hurricane and a tornado kind of rolled into one. And that's all as the Red Cross also responds to the small scale disasters, the things that affect one family or maybe 50 families. Home fires are the largest single cause of disaster in, I think I messed up that statistic, but my point is that, home fires are something that happen every night all over Massachusetts. And while our teams are responding to all these big events all over the country, we're also right here in Massachusetts.
I think home fires is probably one of the things closest to us, that we know about the American Red Cross. In Fitchburg, we've had a number of serious apartment fires that have displaced a number of people, and we have the Salvation Army. I know that works in conjunction with the American Red Cross, as does our Fitchburg Fire Department and the Emergency Management Department in the Fitchburg Fire Department.
Absolutely, and they're great partners. We're lucky to have such strong community support as well, from not just from the people of Fitchburg, but the first responders. And that's part of what we do with the American Red Cross. If you're, a lot of times our crews, we call them DAT crews, but basically we have a team of volunteers that are listening to the same scanners, the same instruments as the fire departments. And when we hear stuff, we're going to these scenes at the same time and making sure that people have a place to stay. I mean, obviously, moments earlier, they were just forced out of their house. A lot of times it's in the middle of the night. They need a place to stay. They might need some extra cash just to get clothes for work the next day. So our teams are there to help with all those needs and just to also provide some comfort and support. The work, I don't think a lot of people that haven't interacted with the Red Cross realize that the work that we do continues weeks after the event. We provide a lot of resources for mental health care and counseling, and if we can't provide it ourselves, we can direct you to places that can.
So when you say volunteers listen to scanners, and there's all this support both before, during, and after a tragic event occurs, how much percentage of the American Red Cross workers would you say are volunteers?
We actually have that. It's 95% of the Red Cross workforce is volunteer. And, I happen to be a paid staff member, but, volunteers fulfill roles from the most entry level to a lot of our mission delivery, and even we have volunteers who come from an executive background who assist with leadership tasks. You know, it's an organization that really, no matter what you want to do, you can find it at the Red Cross.
It sounds like volunteer recruitment would be a big job of the Red Cross if you have 95% of everyone that helps out is a volunteer.
It is, but you know what's also amazing? It's so incredible to see people, and dozens upon dozens at any Red Cross event, that are there simply because they want to do something for someone else, and how long they keep coming back. And I mean, I've met volunteers that started with the Red Cross when they were in high school through one of our youth clubs, and then they've continued throughout their adult lives. And on the same task or the same topic, I've met volunteers who started right out of the military or even in World War II that have held this lifelong relationship with the American Red Cross. It's really, you know, it's longer than some people have held, you know, paying careers.
So getting into the specifics of your volunteer need and maybe what roles or skills are needed for volunteers. You know, say I'm interested in helping out the Red Cross. They've helped me in the past, and I wanna give back. Who are you looking for to help? What kind of skills should I need, or what exactly are you looking for?
Well, you know, I always say the number one thing that you need is that willingness to want to come out and do something good for someone in your community or someone in another community. So once you have that, you're good to go. We'll give you the training after that. Right now, our single biggest need is for people who are healthy enough to work in person in shelters. I've mentioned all these disaster relief operations all over the country. As of a few days ago, the Red Cross was sheltering more than 30,000 people in 10 states in some way, or providing care for 30,000 people in 10 states. And what happens is, a volunteer, if you, let's say you decide you want to sign up and you go to Louisiana for some of the hurricane relief there, it's a 2-week deployment, but these disasters, as I mentioned, they go on for weeks after that. So even as we've had volunteers in the field, they finish a 2-week assignment. Some of them come home, rest a few days, and then want to go right back out again. It's really amazing. But we're looking for anyone who can answer the call to just give them a break, you know, train up and maybe do something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone. It's so important, and it's so rewarding.
Sounds like a great opportunity to get out and help, especially with all the COVID precautions that must be going on right now. When there is a disaster, it must make things so much more difficult.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mentioned that we provide training, and that is especially true in COVID-19. We won't let you go out without a clear understanding of the safety precautions that you need to protect yourself, to protect other volunteers, to protect clients. You know, at Red Cross shelters around the country, we are insisting on those same safety protocols. You know, if you're on a Red Cross property or in a Red Cross vehicle or doing any work for the Red Cross, you must be masked, you must maintain social distancing. We have sanitizer all over for people to use. Our food, when there's food involved, it's individually packaged. You know, it's not, in years past, you might have seen buffet lines with, you know, giant scoops of food and things like that. That's just not possible nowadays. It's unfortunate, but it's necessary, because this pandemic is real, and the only way we're all going to get out of this together is everybody follow the rules.
Absolutely. So volunteers have, you know, the opportunity to work in their skills, or in a range of different opportunities. They have the opportunity to stay locally, or the opportunity to travel around the United States.
Absolutely. It's the experience that you want to make it. Although I do stress that right now, the greatest need that we have is for people that might be willing to travel to an area that's been hit hard by one of these national disasters. Even if that particular bucket doesn't apply to you, please come and talk to us. There are opportunities locally as well. I mean, my background, you know, I'm the director of communications, so my background is in journalism. So anyone that has an interest in journalism can come volunteer in the communications department. If you're actually, you bring up a good point, that specifically for shelters, we're also looking for medical professionals with particular licenses. If you are anything from, an EMT or a paramedic all the way up to a doctor, a dentist, registered nurse, anyone that has special medical training can be really of use in the field as we're, kind of managing a disaster and also a pandemic at the same time.
Certainly. When it comes to the volunteer training, what does the training look like? Do you have to travel far for training? Is it virtual training? How long does it take?
So much of what we can do right now is virtual. It's a little bit more virtual than it has been in the past. We've always our volunteers have really benefited from in-person classes. So we try to incorporate that into what's called a virtual instructor-led training, which in other words, it's a Zoom where you're not in the same room as someone, but at least you're interacting with a physical live person who can answer questions. There are also videos to watch for smaller things that don't need a lot of interaction for it, how to use the cards and the systems and things like that. But, and the other thing too is that there's so much training available for specific skill sets, or if you want to, let's say you have an interest in logistics and you want to work with our fleet, there are specific training paths that can give you those skills so that when it does come time to deploy, if you're interested in deploying to somewhere else, you have a whole resume of classes that you've already taken so you can hit the ground running once you get there.
And, especially for college students or those maybe that are out of a job right now, this volunteer and these skills that you would learn from helping out the Red Cross would really look good on your resume, right?
Absolutely. We encourage, it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel, it can be a confidence boost as well, because it reminds you that you do have these skills. The economy is something that's just really unheard of right now, and people are losing their jobs, but it's not necessarily because of anything they did wrong. But it's still hard not to think that sometimes. So you can come and do an amazing job with the Red Cross. You can see the impact that you're having on people. You get that first, no one's hugging right now, but when someone wants to give you a hug and they kind of do the elbow bump thing. Yeah. And it's rewarding in the moment, and it's rewarding long term. And if there's a particular skill set that you want to refresh, great way to do it.
So when it comes to the American Red Cross, the first thing I think of is blood donation. So is that still is that a need right now? I would imagine with COVID that you must have less blood donations than normal.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing now is the blood situation has been in flux, as all of life has, since the pandemic began. And right now what we're seeing, for a while there was less demand as hospitals put emergency surgeries on, or put non-emergency surgeries on hold, things like that. But the demand for blood has really reached its pre-COVID levels now. But unfortunately, at our blood drives, we have more constraints than we would have had pre-pandemic. So in other words, we need spaces that can accommodate 6 feet between every donor bed and every chair. And we're also, and this is actually in a way a positive, because people are working from home. They have a little more flexibility in their schedule. So they're making appointments and keeping them. But again, because we have to limit 2 appointments only, we do lose some of the just the people walking by that didn't think of it until now, but they see a sign and want to help. And unfortunately, although it breaks our heart, we can't always accommodate that because we have to keep very close track on how many people are in a blood drive at any given time.
Right, because of COVID. So when you do donate blood, what does blood donation look like, and who are the ideal candidates, or who are the ideal blood types for blood donation?
Anybody. That's the easy answer. There are certain restrictions. You have to be at least 17. You have to weigh at least 110 pounds. There's no upper age limit, which I think surprises people sometimes. What we see sometimes is, I've met blood donors, no joke, that are, 85 and have been donating their entire lives, and they still can. Sometimes medications may limit your ability. But for the process itself, during COVID, it does look a little bit different. You know, before you ever are allowed into the room where the donation's happening, you're going to have your temperature taken. You have to wear a mask at all times, a face covering at all times, and sanitize. And then once you get into the blood donation room itself, all our staff will be wearing masks. They already wear gloves, so that wasn't hard. But you'll a lot of times see either chairs spread out or like marks on the floors to where it's okay to stand. I mean, unfortunately, the more we get out and about in our world, it's kind of, we're used to seeing that now. It's sort of become our new normal. So in that sense, it'll look like COVID does everywhere else. Just a little bit more focus on infection control.
And
But again, the need.
What does it take? How long does it take? Like 30 minutes, 45 minutes?
It takes I always tell people to plan at least an hour in regular times. In COVID, maybe plan an hour 15. That includes checking in, doing all your reading, the donation itself, and then staying for snacks afterwards. We always joke about, you do some cookies, but it really is an important part of the donation process because it helps your body recover from the fact that you've just lost, that volume of fluid.
So back to volunteer need for hurricane season. What are the large kind of events that have happened in Massachusetts in this year or in recent years that would be good examples for people that really show a volunteer need?
Well, for example, it's not always something that gets a lot of media attention, but even, at the end of May and then again in July, we had two pretty bad storms where there was rain and wind that caused damage to apartments. I'm thinking of in Malden in particular, there was a roof collapse that forced 70 people out of their homes. So the Red Cross was there to find shelter for those people that had nowhere else to go. In that case, we were able to do it and to use a local hotel room, which it doesn't always look like that, but that kind of sheltering is especially crucial during a pandemic like this because each family can have their own space. They have their own bathroom to be able to use without having to worry about is every surface, contaminated because someone else is sharing it. It really allows for ideal social distancing. So we were able to do that then.
So does the Red Cross kind of contract with local hotels for emergency operations, or do you have plans in place in all around Massachusetts for when disaster strikes?
We do. A big part of disaster preparedness, and actually it's good that we're talking about this because this is National Preparedness Month, but a big part of preparedness is getting some of these plans in place too. But the other part of that is realizing that sometimes plans change and being able to adapt. So yes, we're lucky in Massachusetts to have strong support from hotels and partners. But really what I've found in my years with the Red Cross is that, again, it's just that sort of like Red Cross magic that when your agency is devoted to helping people, other agencies try to help you as best they can, which is really amazing.
Collaboration with other agencies, do you find that a lot when you bring volunteers to travel to other areas of the country that are facing, like the wildfires, like you said, out in California and Oregon, or maybe hurricanes down in the Gulf Coast?
We do. And what's interesting, and I apologize if it's getting a little too into the inside baseball stuff, but I found this fascinating with the Red Cross that all our volunteers, when I mentioned some of the training, one of the trainings that everyone does is something called the concept of operations. Basically,
concept of operations?
Yeah, I know. This gets like into the weeds,
okay.
But hear me out. So it's basically a system where we have a playbook, and no matter where you're from, if you're volunteering with the Red Cross of Massachusetts or California, Texas, everyone uses the same playbook. So no matter where you're coming in from, you can have 1,300 people coming from every city in the country to one spot, but they're all following the same procedures, which really does make for an efficient operation. And similarly, all our emergency responders, they train in something called instant command, from fire to police to FEMA and the National Guard, all use a version of this instant command the Red Cross staff is trained in that as well. So we can speak the same language as our community partners from the ground on up, which again, it's amazing to see when it all comes together.
The beauty of having a national organization or organizing different state outreach programs.
Absolutely. And the beauty of people that are willing to learn those systems, even though, again, this is volunteer work, but they're doing
95%.
homework.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So it must cost a lot of money to be able to train, to have the infrastructure, to be able to train all these people, to have the communication in place, to organize and partner with all these agencies, and just to really move volunteers from one place to another. What does your donation need look like right now, and what are some ways that people can donate?
Well, we always say there are 3 ways that you can help the Red Cross, and we've touched on 2 of them: volunteer your time, give blood, and then the third is if you're able to make a financial donation of any amount. Yes, the Red Cross absolutely relies on the generosity of our sponsors and donors to be able to provide the work that we do. The easiest way I find is you can text 90999 from your cell phone, and that'll make a $10 donation to the Red Cross. You can also visit redcross.org to find out more specific donation opportunities or to make a particular kind of gift. The work couldn't be done without the support of people who are able to give financially as well.
So redcross.org, and you can donate like a recurring donation or a larger donation, or you could just easily text from your cell phone 90999. And it'll prompt you to donate $10.
Yes, exactly. Text Red Cross to 90999.
That's pretty convenient.
We try to make it easy because people, I mean, everyone's got so many demands on their time. We're being pulled in a million directions. So if we can make it easier, you're helping us. So we're glad to.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Kelly. Well, is there anything that we didn't touch on, or anything that you'd like to close with?
Sure. Again, redcross.org is our national website. If you're looking for specific to Massachusetts information, including how to make donations, it's redcross.org/MA. And that'll take you to our local page. And one of the things I like there is you can see some more kind of very local focus on some of the relief that we do. You can follow us on Facebook as well. We're Red Cross of Massachusetts there, at Red Cross MA on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. There's a lot of ways. I love telling this story, the story of our volunteers and the story of our amazing staff who, in their spare time also volunteer. It's really an incredible thing to see.
Yep. Well, I'm glad, and I'm sure many other thousands of people are very glad that you volunteered, that we have this volunteer structure in place, especially when the need comes. So thank you so much, Kelly Isenor, Director of Communications from American Red Cross of Massachusetts. So glad to have you on and chat with us.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you, Sam.
All right, and thank you so much for watching at home. And we will be back with another segment and another interview.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Lori Trahan, and I just want to take a moment to let you know how important your participation is in the 2020 census for the city of Fitchburg and for our state.
Access to federal funding is based upon our local census numbers. These are counted every 10 years. As your mayor of the city of Fitchburg, I can't stress enough how important it is that we count everyone here locally, because Fitchburg counts.
This year's count will determine how much of the $1.5 trillion in federal aid will go to improving our schools, rebuilding our bridges and roads, and helping our local small businesses. That's why we need your help to make sure that you and all of your loved ones are counted.
These are the dollars that will provide relief to our families and community efforts. Remember, the information you provide is strictly confidential, regardless of immigration status, housing security, age, race, or ability. Everyone counts.
So please take a moment and go to 2020census.gov
or call 844-330-2020 to complete your census today. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome back to Discussing Fitchburg Now. This segment that we have here now, we are discussing private wells in the city of Fitchburg and in the region of north central Massachusetts. We have on Jim Starbard, who is the state lead for water and wastewater programs at RCAP Solutions. And we have Amie Shei, the Vice President of Programs for the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts. And we have my favorite Director of Public Health, Steve Curry from the city of Fitchburg. Thanks everyone for coming on.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so the private well program this is administered through RCAP Solutions and funded by the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And so the private well program is kind of a way to encourage people in a variety of ways through testing and education about the quality of their private well water. We, you know, a lot of people in the city of Fitchburg and in our region have city water, and city water has to be regularly tested and has strict protocols. But that's not always the case with private wells. Is that correct, Jim?
It is. With private wells, it's really the responsibility of the homeowner after the well's put in. So a public water system is tested, you know, at least monthly, if not daily, depending on the size of the system. But a private well, if it's not tested by the homeowner, you really don't understand what is in the water that you're drinking. And many of the contaminants that could cause harm are odorless and tasteless. So you won't notice that they're there unless you actually do the testing. So we recommend some testing be done yearly, like a bacteria or nitrate, which would give you immediate health issues if it was in your water, and then other contaminants every 10 years, because it's not something that could, you know, really change your water. But you want to keep on it, you know, at least on those regular basis, just to ensure that your family's health.
So these are recommendations for testing, but there are no requirements for people with private wells to get tested after their initial kind of well construction?
No. Some communities have adopted regulations to have transfer property water testing done. But other than that, no, it's really up to the homeowner to maintain their home like any other asset they have within the home. One just happens to be their drinking water. And I think a lot of people do take it for granted that a well water must be clean because it's coming from the ground. But, you know, there's natural contaminants that are naturally occurring that could cause issues with your health.
So Amie, you are from the Health Foundation, and they must have identified a strong need health-wise for the community in order to fund this program. Why do you find that private well testing is so important?
Well, we believe that access to clean drinking water is an important contributor to good health. It's essential to good health. So when RCAP Solutions came to us with this proposal, we recognized the need for more information, more education about potential contamination of private wells. As Jim mentioned, many homeowners aren't aware of the need to test their water regularly and also the presence of potential contaminants. Some of your audience members may have heard about PFAS or forever chemicals in the news recently. That is not one of the chemicals that we're testing for specifically, but I think the issue just highlights the need to understand what is actually in your drinking water.
PFAS is not an issue in our area, or this is not something we're testing for?
Jim, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Currently, it is not something that is regulated by Mass DEP as of yet, but this fall, winter, that regulation will be going into effect for public water systems. Usually when tests get done with public water systems, it usually trickles down to anything that a public water system tests for, a private well should test for as well. And, you know, if there's a well that, an area that has private wells that's known to have it, that could be an issue as well. So it is a unknown at this point. Some testing has been done, some communities have found it, but there's going to be a lot more robust testing done throughout the whole Commonwealth, a very public water system, as well as quite a number of private wells. So there will be a lot more info in the next few years of where these contaminants are. And right now, it just hasn't been enough had enough testing to figure out exactly where these contaminants are, but there is some communities that have concerns right here in northern central Mass, not Fitchburg in particular, but other communities in the Route 2 corridor, you should say.
Oh, yeah, we've been hearing about them a lot, for sure. Have you heard anything like this in Fitchburg, Steve?
There has not been any results on that, but we've certainly seen our share of contaminants in the last couple of years. We adopted regulations just a couple of years ago, so we're kind of new to the whole process, but arsenic has been very popular in private wells. And I might say that folks, it's a scary thing for folks. Out of sight, out of mind, but every time you stick a shovel in the ground, it's very expensive. So if you're not sick, don't bother with it. And it's just not a good method to take. We really need to identify the private water in the area, private well water. As you mentioned, Fitchburg's about 80% sewer, so there's only about 20% of our population that does survive on a private well, but that is somewhere around 1,200 wells. So that's a good number, and it's a lot of wells out there that, you know, we would love to make sure that they're safe.
So about 1,200 wells in Fitchburg alone, and I would assume most of those wells were built a long time ago?
That is correct. We started keeping records in the late 80s. I would say a good portion of those were constructed before that time or around that time. So there's a lot of wells out there that really haven't had an adequate test.
And a lot of
and in some
wells
cases,
we might not even know about.
Correct.
So a common contaminant in Fitchburg and maybe a lot of areas that have apple orchards would be arsenic. And those we could test those thanks to this program, or even through private testing if this program ran out of money, perhaps, let's say, in order to determine the safe levels in our well water?
Yeah, kind of where I was going with this program is that I believe in multiple phases. This program will try to provide some assistance to those residents that might need it when they need to install some sort of filter system because of their contaminants. That's what I really love about this program, and is that's the goal, is to not just identify it, but correct it as well.
So step one is reach out to those that we know have wells and reach out to those that we think might have wells. Is that correct?
That sounds about right, yep.
And then, this program that RCAP Solutions is administering helps to not only identify them, but do the testing as well?
Yes, we're currently actually doing that sampling currently, and we've done, it's 25 communities that we're targeting within the grant, Fitchburg being one of them. So we've started doing that sampling. Like I said, we're doing about 20 this year, but we expect to do many more next year. But we're also going to have a lot of educational and public outreach to those wells that we're not going to be able to test every well, regardless of how much funding we got. So those other ones, we really want to get the public awareness out there, the homeowners, to take it upon themselves to get that test done. That if one of the local DEP certified labs. And like I said, if they can test once a year for bacteria and once every 10 years for the other contaminants, they give them the peace of mind and know that they're protecting their family. And if they are finding any contaminants, there's treatment basically for any kind of issue you find. There's ways to abate the issue. So I think it's proper that the homeowner takes that action and to protect their family.
So for those with a well at home, the first step is to contact you or a well test. And do they just take water out of their faucet? Is it that simple to start?
It is. We get the laboratory would give. If you didn't do it with us, we would bring the. We did. If you're doing a well assessment with us, we would actually bring the sample kit out and do the sampling. Well, we give the kit to you. You go in the house and do it, and then we bring it to the lab. If you're doing it on your own, I would suggest you go contact the certified lab, go get the sampling bottles from that lab. Then take that sample from your kitchen sink and then bring it back to that lab that same day you take it. That's probably your best bet, because stuff like bacteria, you want to make sure you have sterile bottles, etc., to make sure it's done right. You're not getting false positives.
Was there something you want to add, Amie?
I was just going to piggyback on what Jim just said and say that the end goal of this project is not to conduct well water testing for all of the private wells in this region, because they're limited resources, limited time. But we do hope to achieve some sort of broader systems change at the end of the day. We hope that there's more education and awareness for the need to test private wells, and also to encourage local boards of health to establish more standardized regulations about the need for private well testing. So for example, Jim mentioned that some local boards of health have the requirement that when there's a transfer of property, the homeowner has to test the well before the property is transferred, similar to what occurs with Title V and septic. And at least that's a set point in time when for a fact that some testing will occur. Whether the future homeowner continues to test or not, that's a different story, but at least there is some information that is shared when a home is sold.
So that's right now we're working with local boards of health in order to institute those rulings, but that's not currently a state regulation that well water must be tested for contaminants after, during the sale of a home.
That's correct. So it varies from town to town.
Does Fitchburg currently have that regulation, Steve?
Yes, it was adopted, I believe, 2 years ago. But previous to that, it was pretty much instruct and do what you want. Construct and do what you want.
Mm. Do we see a kind of any hotspot areas of contaminants, Jim, throughout our North Central Massachusetts region, have you found, or is it really kind of generally localized?
No, actually, the reason why this region was picked is actually known to have high arsenic, uranium, and radon, which are all naturally occurring contaminants. So that was, not every town is known to be high, really high in them, but the region as a whole is. So that's why the region was picked. And we actually have ranked towns by, higher risk to lower risk based on past research for those contaminants done by USGS and other entities. But yeah, we know that there's already naturally occurring issues here. But actually, on the limited testing results we've gotten back, the number one issue we keep finding is total coliform, regular just bacteria in the well, which, it's not a localized issue. Anyone could have that. But and usually it's just because it's, the wellhead isn't protected well. They don't have the right cover on, or the electric junction box isn't connected right. And, it's easy fixes, but it leaves a pathway into your well that, possibly can get a bacteria that could really do you harm. A total coliform doesn't mean there's a harmful bacteria in the water, but it does mean that there's something going on, if you will.
So, like Director Curry mentioned, putting a shovel in the ground is very expensive, and people might be afraid of that cost. So if you were to test, if, I have a private well and I were to test that, and we were to find high bacteria counts, or we were to find high arsenic or uranium radon levels, what kind of remediation services would you say are necessary at that point? And are there grant programs available for those homeowners that can't afford the cost?
Well, there is treatment options for all of those contaminants. They would be different ones. Something like a radon, you want a full, a whole house kind of treatment, because the real risk in that is actually taking a shower and breathing in the radon just like you would in your basement. The arsenic uranium is more of an ingestion. So you could use, a radon would be a whole house, but arsenic uranium, you could use like what's called a point of use filter, which is a smaller filter just for the water that you're going to consume, if you will. But pretty much is any issue out there, there's pretty much a way to fix it. Sometimes bacteria issues are due to really old wells, like a dug well, and sometimes that's always the best option is to drill one with new technology. But usually
That's worst case. That's worst case scenario.
That's worst case, and that's usually if it's an old dug well and the bacteria is just to a level that, and just there's no way to basically seal the well and keep it from having bacteria going in. And at that point, it's almost kind of like a surface water plan, and we don't really advise any homeowner to take that on. That would involve some sort of like filtration and chlorination, and leave that to the Fitchburg Water Department.
But so some things are kind of sound as simple as maybe like a whole house filter when the water's, that you connect, I don't know, maybe where the water comes in from the well, and you can install a filter for radon and other, I don't know, contaminants like that.
Yeah, the whole house filter would be right when the water comes into the house, because you're treating all the water for the whole home, no matter what you're going to use it for. A point of use, you would put at the kitchen sink. So any of your eating and drinking water, you would use that. And for everything else, you could just, bypass it. That way you're not filtering water that's unnecessary, which would be more costly, if you will.
It takes a lot of electricity to run that, to pump through a whole house filter, I would assume.
It's more than that. It's changing the media that's in it. Every filter has its limitation and life to it. And the less water you put through it, the longer life you have with it. So that's why, if you don't need to treat the water to bathe, then, we always suggest just putting a point of use in.
So after you test, your water could be deemed totally fine, or it could range determining on the contaminants, whether you need a point of use filter is recommended, or a whole house filter, or a whole new well, or fixing your head, or whatever it is. What's the cost range approximately for these remediation services to fix a well?
They would be all over depending on what you needed to fix. A new well cap could be under $100 if you're handy. A new well could be $20,000. So a whole house filter is going to be a lot more expensive than a point of use filter. So it's really dependent on the scenario, the situation.
But the most important thing is that you recognize that if you have these contaminants or not, and if you do, then really no cost. The cost is less significant than the solution, right? So yes. For those that maybe can't afford it, what kind of grant programs are there available?
Unfortunately, there is not money, and that's another part of this program that we're trying to get, is some kind of financial assistance to low-income homeowners. Because even before this, we did some private well work, and we would get calls from homeowners that need some of them need very little money, a couple $1,000 for a new well pump for an elderly woman to stay in her home. And just unfortunately, the only real funding source right now is USDA Rural Development's loan fund, and it's the income levels are so low, I haven't been able to find anyone actually qualifies, but it's a national program, so it looks at national income levels as opposed to per capita. State funding, a lot of the funds we looked at actually preclude the funding to be used for private wells. You can fix a septic system, you can actually abandon your well and tie into a public water system like Fitchburg, but you can't fix the well. So that's another part of the program. We're trying to make some changes there and maybe come up with a loan fund too to remedy that situation. Because right now the only real hope is USDA Rural Development, or if they have equity in their home to take out a loan.
So you're partnering with like local boards of health, like our Fitchburg Board of Health. What other organizations are you partnering with to ensure that maybe those with wells that we don't know about get this outreach and this education?
Sure. Well, we're partnering with the boards of health through their networks, the Montechusett Public Health Network, which Steve runs out of Fitchburg, and also the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, which takes care of the 495 Route 2 area, if you will. That's kind of the target area. So those two networks of boards of health really are the target areas. And also we work with Mass DEP. They've been great supporters before the grant and now. They sit on our leadership team. We also have Mass Environmental Health Association, which is a trade organization for the local health inspectors. They have a seat on our leadership team. Local officials, Congresswoman Trahan sits on our leadership team. I've heard actually from other elected officials in the area, other town officials, town managers. So the outreach has really been quite positive, and we know the word's getting out there. Even I mentioned that the homeowner response for the sampling has been tremendous, but also the response from all town officials and elected officials has been great too.
When it comes to contamination, a lot of these contaminants we're thinking are from past operations or past past operations, like an old apple tree farm, for example, and they sprayed with arsenic. Are there any kind of current polluting things that might be happening in our community that we also want to address that might be polluting private wells now?
Well, I think we mentioned the PFAS, and that's the new hot topic. But I'm sure there's tons of other stuff out there. A lot of stuff we're looking for is naturally occurring. But there's a ton of other things. I mean, landfills are known to be contaminations of groundwater. I've seen people that have a backyard junkyard that contaminate the neighborhood full of private wells. It wasn't even a permitted junkyard, but someone's backyard ended up becoming one, and old trucks leaking stuff on the ground. Next thing you know, the whole neighborhood is contaminated. So it's one thing about drinking water. It's an ever evolving science, if you will.
So is that kind of education also part of this current operation? Educating not to, I don't know, dump oil in your backyard, or maybe other chemicals?
Not specifically. I mean, when I do the well assessments, that is something we look for. What is around? What's your neighbors around? What's around? Are you near a landfill? Are you near an airport? Where the septic systems are. Those are all different things we look for. I haven't really thought about doing outreach on what not to put around, but it's a great good thought. Because it all, once the groundwater is contaminated, it just makes it hotter and hotter.
Okay. Are we working at a state level to ensure that maybe what we're doing at a local level, they're now requiring statewide?
Well, we are working with Mass DEP, which puts out the model regulations to the local boards of health to adopt. So the ultimate goal is to make that model regulation a statewide code for like any other public health code that like Steve and his team has to enforce. It comes down from the state as a minimum standard, and then the local board of health can be more stringent but not less stringent. Private wells, for whatever reason, is one of those gray areas that, for whatever reason, didn't come down like that. Like a Title V, that's a state code. Every board of health in the state enforces the Title V code. The local board of health could be more stringent than Title V, but not less stringent.
Right.
Private wells, it's up to each and every 351 local boards of health to adopt a private well regulation. And if not, there is no regulation. And or if they adopted it You know, some of them we've seen that they adopted in 1970, and it's half a page of paper. And you know, if they haven't updated it, those are the law of the land. So.
Okay, so through this private well program funded by the Health Foundation, what can we see? You know, this is a multi-phase program that was mentioned. What can we see coming up in the future, and how can homeowners with wells participate?
Well, in the future, we plan on doing all the things we discussed, but in a more robust way. We originally planned on announcing this program in the spring, but due to the pandemic, we decided to push it off a little while. So that, you know, we really expected to really have already dug in with the local boards of health, and already completed these well assessments with the testing by now, a number of other activities. You know, but so we're a little behind the game there, but you know, planning to catch up with it, and really plan on doing all of those more robustly next year. This is really just to, you know, get the word out there to everyone, get more partners in, more participants, see what kind of need is out there. And, you know, being a planning year too, we've learned a lot, and, you know, changes will be made to the program as we move forward.
So how can people be a part of the program, or contact you maybe and see if they are a good participant for this?
Yeah, definitely, we're on our website. It's the best way to get a hold of us at RCAP Solutions. Private Wells in Massachusetts is a whole page to this program. There's tons of more information there, and also how to request a well assessment sample. You can take our needs assessment on there as a questionnaire. We're trying to get information from the community to better gauge our work. Yeah, and you know, contact your local boards of health too if you think that you know, the towns should make different regulations. And well, not Fitchburg, guys have, but if you're in another town, you know, we're anxious to work with everyone to get the word out, to help, you know, get some more robust regulations in there, and hopefully spur on to a statewide code like we mentioned, because a lot of time the local boards of health are the ones that make the changes in the state. They, you know, a number of local boards of health will pass a new code, and you know, kind of snowballs and becomes the new state law. I saw that with smoking regulations. A lot of people made it to 21, now it's 21. Municipalities banned smoking in restaurants and inside, and the state went ahead and did it. So taking that model to move forward with it.
Yeah. Yeah, Fitchburg does a really good job of protecting our water, and I think our health too. Is there anything that we should, that we want to let the residents of Fitchburg know, Steve?
Sure. Jim's program through RCAP is on the Fitchburg webpage. It is on the same webpage as our health web under wells, private wells, and it basically explains Fitchburg regulations and how to comply with them, along with an application. So it is also on the Montezut Public Health Network webpage, which is part of the City of Fitchburg Health Department webpage. And that webpage covers 13 communities in our area, various small towns that are 100% well. So this program would be very important to those smaller communities.
Certainly, only in 20% of Fitchburg, but some communities are all well water.
Well, it's only 20%, but again, Fitchburg is, as we all know, on rocks. Decaying rock is a problem for water.
That's the radon?
It could be, yes. So we really should test our water to, at the very least, to know what we're drinking.
All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming on. Is there anything else that you'd like to close with, Jim or Amy?
No, thank you for having us. And you know, all your viewers, feel free to contact us. We're here to help.
All right. Well, thank you so much for you know, offering this program and for educating our residents on it. And thank you so much for watching at home. and learning a little more about this program. For more information, you can go to the City of Fitchburg Health Department webpage and learn all about that. Or you can go to RCAP Solutions. You can search RCAP Solutions Private Well Program, and that should come up right in the Google. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.